Hello, 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 and welcome to the Adventure Effect Live with Tom and Curtis. We are very excited today to be chatting with George, who is a coach that we met on an intensive recently. And we were immediately struck by his presence and by the depth of his soul. And as we got to know him and we got to hear a little bit more about how much of a role adventure and spirituality has played in his life, we just knew that he was someone that we had to get on the podcast. So I will turn you over to Curtis, who will tell you a bit more about him. You need to unmute, Curtis.
George started Shapeshift coaching about 3 years ago. And he started Shapeshift coaching because he had been fly fishing in remote regions, hiking through Yosemite Valley. He had been big wave surfing. He'd been on psychedelic experiences. He'd been on humanitarian missions down to Guatemala. And each of these trips that he went on gave him a peak experience. And he was questing to discover a way to integrate these peak experiences into everyday life. And I suppose the driving question for him was how do we have these peak experiences without having to go on an epic adventure? How do we bring that sense of focus and peacefulness and singularity into our daily life? And so we have George with us here today, and we're very excited for him to share the foundation of Shapeshift coaching and what adventure means to him. George, welcome here.
Thank you so much for having me, Curtis and Tom. And I just have to say, that was truly such a heartfelt introduction. And we're off to a good start when I can feel something already starting to expand with inside. and I just feel so seen by you guys in this moment. And I just feel like it's such an honor and a privilege to be a part of this journey together with you today.
We're thrilled to have you, George. And we are super excited to embark on this journey together for the next hour. So why don't you start by telling us, what does adventure mean to you?
Yeah, first off, I'll say I have to be so grateful for my father. That's the first thing that comes up. My father is the one that showed me adventure at a very young age. And a little backstory about him, I think where the zenith of his adventure was in sailing big boats, a big boat series in throughout the course of his life. He sailed with Roy Disney, Walt Disney's nephew, and won races to Hawaii, where it's an 11-day race on a sailboat, 50-foot seas, pitch black conditions. This is the man that raised me. And he raised me in the water surfing. He raised me on mountaintop skiing and snowboarding. He's the one that took me to these remote places like Slovenia in Europe to go fly fishing. Not something very common. And through all of this, all these experiences, what I found to be the common theme of adventure is when you go outside of the world that you know, the familial world, and you embark upon some journey that involves mystery, some uncertainty. And for me, a lot of those experiences involved high action sports, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's at the core what adventure is. It's just this process where you're going out and coming alive through an experience of travel, and in a way, this experience that we're creating right now is an adventure. We don't know where this conversation's going. There's some mystery here, but we're doing it with an open mind, and we may stumble and fall. I once heard a story at Burning Man that it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. and the best plan is to sometimes have no plan. So I think all of these things to me have what has brought a sense of adventure to my life, of radical experiences, of doing new things, of embracing uncertainty, being ready to respond when something goes wrong, And for me, it's very heavily, I think, at its high point, adventure has involved travel and being in nature. And there's something incredibly powerful that happens on a spiritual level of when we feel something, when we look at something in awe, or we do something physical and we experience something physiologically that puts us into something beyond flow state. And what Curtis was mentioning is what Abraham Maslow called a peak experience, where there's a sense of oneness, a sense of euphoria, a sense of deep connection with yourself, and as if you're a part of the universe. And you can literally, when you're really present with it, just feel your soul expanding in the moment, whether it's looking out at sunset on the horizon, the feeling that you get after you climb a mountaintop, the feeling after you catch a huge wave where if you fall, you would have been brushed up against a lot of really sharp coral reef, and who knows, some people could have even died from that experience, right? When you get to that other side, induces this peak experience. So both that and adventure, to me, seem very much so enmeshed and in tandem for me in my life.
Yeah, I love that we've just gone straight deep dive into peak experience. What I love about peak experience is that everyone assumes that people who do these things, surfing, base jumping, adrenaline sports in inverted commas, that they do it just for the adrenaline. But actually the peak experience is so much more than that. It's hyper focus. It's being aware of every little detail of everything that's around you. For Curtis and I, climbing is probably our biggest outlet for adventure. And when you're on a really hard climb, all of your focus, everything is on the end of your fingers. And you can feel every little detail, every nuance of the tiny little edge that you're holding onto, because your life depends on it. And so it's not so much about the risk, the adrenaline, the fear, although those all play a part in it, but it's that deep state of focus and hyper awareness.
Mm-hmm. I've done a little bit of climbing in the gym before, so it's exciting to learn that you guys are climbers, because I know so much when it's almost it is a life or death experience when you're on a mountaintop, you're on the face of a wall, and you're climbing up, and it's like if you let go, you fall off, and so naturally what ends up happening is that we are able to cut through the mind game. We're able to cut through things that would normally distract us or get us off center. And for me, that comes up a lot in when you surf really big waves, and it's just like you are focused on one thing in that moment, and it's either catching that wave or getting onto the other side of it before it breaks on top of you. And there is nothing else going on in your mind other than that. And I think what's symbolic of that for me is it shows us how much focus we can really harness in a single moment that can create such an extraordinary experience. And it's obviously it's powerful, and it's so enlightening about, okay, how can I take that experience? How could I recreate that experience in a non-adrenaline focused sport? How could I create that experience? And what we're talking about is presence, is ultimate one sense concentration. And that's why I've also practiced meditation. I've also practiced yoga, because these are tools, and how we do anything is how we do everything. So when we start practicing this, putting ourselves in these states that create this sense of focus, it's a mindset muscle that we're developing that we can then take on when we're in our relationships. People often say they want more time with each other. They want more time with each other, but how often times do we spend time, but we're not really there? When we're at home, we're thinking about work, and when we're at work, we're thinking about home. We're not present. And so it's like, how do we start to develop a sense of presence in our life? How do we start to develop a sense of focus of when we're here? When I'm on this podcast with you guys, I am here. I'm not over there. I'm not over there. I'm here. How do we start to practice that and just work through cutting through the mental chatter and getting out of our head. And, you know, that's what transitions the physical adventure realm into the more spiritual realm. You know, for me, I'm a questioner, so it all naturally gets brought up. How can I bring this into other areas of my life? How can I bring this into my sense of career, my sense of mission? How can I help my clients experience this so they don't get so caught up in that hamster wheel and in the thoughts that, you know, may not be serving them to get them to where it is they want to go. Like when I'm surfing, I have a goal. I want to catch the best wave I possibly can and ride it to the best of my ability. That's a goal. When you go to work, you want to achieve the most amount of results in your job, in your career, make the most money, whatever it is. When you're in a loving, passionate relationship, you want to experience that relationship to the most passionate level possible. And that requires presence. That requires you showing up 100% engaged, 100% committed. And I think that's what some of these adventure sports teach us.
Absolutely, George. It's such a core question for me in my life is how do I bring that presence and that focus from the crag or the ski hill into my daily life? Because right now I would say that I have done it at times, but right now I'm definitely feeling separated from that focus. And having had it in my daily life before, having achieved that integration, it's a more hungry feeling than not knowing what it feels like to not have that integration. And so maybe you could just chat with us right now and we could back and forth a little bit about ways that you have achieved that integration, and maybe that'll spark something for me and for Tom.
Yeah, two things are coming up to mind right now. And the first thing is alignment.
Mm-hmm.
When you're climbing a mountain, there are a lot of things that have to fall into alignment in order to successfully get to the top. You have to have your physical strength up. You have to have the proper gear. You have to have the proper shoes. There are all these, and these are all physical things, but there are a lot of physical things that have to fall into place for this to happen. As soon as something goes wrong, everything falls apart. And so then the question is, if it's alignment that helps us channel our energy to be able to focus one point, then where do we cultivate alignment in our life? That example that I said to you earlier of some people are at home, but they're thinking about work, and they're at work and they're thinking about home. They're not in alignment with themselves and in their intention and what they want to be doing. And we make decisions in our life very often from this place of I need and I should. I need is desperation. I need to make more money. I need to have a relationship. I need to have kids in order to be happy. I need the house. I need this. I need this. And it's very needy. And the thing is, needy is when we're in a needy energetic state, we're very erratic. We're very uncertain. And we're acting from probably from a sense of conditioning of what we were taught we think we need in order to survive, get by, be happy, live fulfilled, whatever that is. And here's the interesting thing. Needy is creepy. I mean, think about if you're at a bar and you see a guy and he's really needy and desperate and he's trying to hit on another girl or another guy, whatever. He comes off as very needy. And it's creepy, and the girl or the guy will retract away from that person, right? And so when we show up with this needy energy, it doesn't allow us to focus properly from the right place in alignment with ourselves. And I would say that the second thing that comes up is this nice idea of I should, and I should is this place of rationalization where we start getting in our head about rationalizing. Should I do this? Should I do that? And again, that takes us away from the third thing, which is inspiration, which sounds like I want. When you're doing something because it is truly in alignment with what you want to do, it activates focus. I want to be on this podcast with you guys. It's not like I need to do this to get my name out there, or I should do this because I'll become more popular. I want to do this because I feel like we all share the same values and we have a message to share with the world. It inspires me to talk about this thing. So I don't have to come in with a plan. I don't have to come in with something of what I need to do. I just have to show up congruent with who I am. And I think that's the second piece of this, is then the question leads, well, what do I want? And in order to go through that journey of self-discovery, what I found is that there's this, I call it this totem pole of our identity. And in order to get to what we want, we have to understand who we are. We have to understand our thoughts. We have to understand our feelings, our emotions. We have to understand the principles that we live by, or in other words, the rules that we've created for ourselves. We have to understand our belief systems. We have to understand what our values are, our way of being. And when I found all of these things are in alignment with one another, and you lead into life from that place, not from a place of I need or I should, but from a place of I want because I know who I am, that creates a shift, a peak experience that when you're here, present with someone, it can be on a conversation with your lover, it can be in a conversation with a friend, it can be you by yourself at the beach. It doesn't need to involve high action sports, but when you're truly centered and aligned with yourself, where you want to be, doing what you want to do, something shifts in life. It's like you become the center of your universe, and nature, gravity, all start pulling things slowly towards you, almost feeling like effortlessly, like synchronicities start happening, or in other words, coincidences. But I truly believe that there are no coincidences. I believe that there are meaningful omens that occur in our life, that there's something greater, there's a power that is guiding us. And our work is not to force what's happening in the external world, but realign ourselves in our internal world. And again, falling back into that's where adventure sports teach me how to work through fear. They teach me how to be present with what I want to be doing. Yoga, meditation help me practice training my mind to work through and understand thoughts and practice focus and concentration. And ultimately service. When we're serving other people, that puts us in a peak experience because the soul's nature is to serve other people. And so having learned these understandings and these wisdoms and been able to see how what makes them work for me and in my life has helped me show up with presence and, as you guys would say, with focus.
Tom, you're muted.
What struck me as you were talking there was a lack mentality versus an abundance mentality. I need and I should is coming from a place of I don't have and therefore my life sucks. Mm-hmm. Whereas I want, or anything that goes with that, is coming from a place of this is fun and interesting. The world will be a better place because of this. I am complete and whole, and this would be great. And I love that you brought in service at the end there. You know, so much of society is geared around what I want and what I need, and fuck everyone else. Mm-hmm. And you know, it could be said, without wanting to get political, that you know that kind of selfishness and greed is at play in some of the problems that exist in the world right now. I'd love to talk a bit more about service, and you know, you talked about the trip that you went to Guatemala. Tell us more about that and your experience of living in service that way.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And prior to that experience, what I'll share in context for the audience is that prior to that trip, I had worked in sales in corporate America for a $2 billion publicly traded company. And I was coming from the place of, I need to make more money. I should make money in order to be happy, in order to survive, in order to buy the house near the beach. And I did all those things. And the place that I was coming from when I was working in corporate America was selfish. It was, what's in it for me? How do I maximize my return on my energetic investment? How do I make the most money? And I'll be honest, that led me to a place of extreme loneliness. And it put me into a depression. Because I was at the top and I was lonely. And someone once told me that if you are at the top and you're lonely, you got there the wrong way. And it took me on this whole journey of self-discovery, of personal development. And so I went to a Tony Robbins seminar, and he Miyagi'd me, and there was a beautiful story there. But one of the things I learned there was that service is the ultimate form of our own sense of fulfillment. So I'm great. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I hear this, I understand this, but the truth is, guys, information doesn't change us. Experiences do. And I got an invitation from a friend who started a company that was a travel with a purpose intention. And I got invited to go to Guatemala to build homes in a third world rural area. These people have almost nothing. They live in the dirt. They sleep in the dirt. The places that they live in are cinder blocks with just metal scaffolds over them. And we were there partnering with a local NGO, and it was a beautiful experience where, you know, we came there as a group of maybe 20, and they would take you in pairs and then pair you up with these other volunteers from the local NGO who happened to be teenagers. And so I'm like 28, 29 at the time. And you've got these 15, 16, 17-year-olds teaching you how to build this home for this other community, right? For this family that you get assigned to. And it was a tremendous experience. I'd never done anything like this before. And you know, when we were building homes, I noticed that some of the neighbors were starting to come over, and they were grabbing shovels out of our hands and starting shoveling. And they didn't speak any English, but they just, all of a sudden, they all started coming over to start helping us. And they're, you know, I have, you know, I don't have working hands, right? So when I'm using the saw to cut wood, right, I'm getting blisters, and I'm going slow. And then this other guy who's like half my size, guy looked like he weighed 110 pounds, comes over, and he's like this ripped Guatemalan guy, and he just starts sawing this thing really fast, right? Totally upstaging me in the construction work. But he's laughing and he's showing me how to do it, and then I start doing it the right way. And it was a really fun experience. And you know, each day afterwards, we would get together with our group and we would start processing this. And the conversation that got brought up was, hey, you know, what's coming up? What do you notice? And people are like, wow, I'm so grateful that I have a toilet. I'm so grateful that I have a home. I'm so grateful for my phone. I'm so grateful that I have technology and cable and all these things, right? And it's very easy to go to a place where you see that they have nothing and automatically find a sense of abundance versus scarcity, which you were talking about earlier, Tom, which is powerful in of itself. But here's what stood out to me was that as I was building these homes, you know, you're working and then you take breaks. And I remember coming up after digging some dirt, and I remember wiping the sweat off my face and just looking around me. And I saw all of these beautiful people, these children running around, laughing with one another. The men were coming over and helping one another out. Everybody was doing their part as a community to support life. And even this little girl who was like maybe 4 years old, she had a little water pail on her back. And I could show you guys a picture of this later. And there was no running water. So water gets dumped off at these certain barrels in the town. And she'd walk there and walk back. And you know, the barrel of water that she was carrying was probably no bigger than this cup, right? But she's doing her part. And she's smiling. And I looked at everybody and I said, did anybody else notice that there were neighbors coming over and helping you build this home? And people were like, yeah, they came over, they had their own tools, they were helping us build. We probably couldn't have done it without them. And I just looked at everybody. I said, and did you see the love and the joy? And yeah, people, we were laughing with them. We were hugging. And there was this joy and this community and connection that I had never experienced before. And I just looked at everybody. I said, when was the last time that you helped your neighbor with something? Let alone build a home. When was the last time you picked up a shovel and helped them do something? When was the last time you even said hello to somebody in an elevator? And I just said, you know, we have all of these things that we've acquired with industrialization and the progression of society and suburban neighborhoods. And yet we've fallen into a trap of isolation. We've fallen into this world where it's a hustle and bustle and it's you against me, and we're all fighting the rat race to get to the top. And we've kind of lost the sense of community. We've lost the sense of that we're in this together. And while these people have very little than us, and I am grateful for the things that we have, they have something so pure still. They have their humanity, they have their love and their connection, and no level of poverty has been able to take that away from them. And everyone just kind of sat back and was silent for a moment, and you could really feel the energy sink in, because it was like, wow, these people have, in a way, so much more. And it brought up a lot for people. After the whole thing was over, we went to an area, to a retreat center, and there was a shaman there that did this beautiful fire cacao ceremony. And there were a lot of tears and a lot of energy was being flushed out of people, because we were all relating to that sense of isolation that we've experienced in our life, and that sense of where has our selfishness got in the way of connection with other people. Even some people that were in relationship there were like, where's the blockage in connection for us? Where have we been so caught up in what I want to do, or what I think I need to do, that we haven't been able to work in harmony with one another? And so I've got this ring on that trip, and I wear this ring every day just to remind me to help your fellow brother. And we always learn, help thy neighbor, love thy neighbor. And that was the first time I really experienced a peak experience without sports, where it was from service. And frankly, because it was bigger than me, in a way, it was even on a higher level than I'd ever experienced in any big wave, any mountain I'd climbed, because it was a connection, a soul to soul connection with me and other people, that I'd made a difference, that I'd done something important in my life. You know, I could catch all the big waves in the world, but I had this realization that if I were on my deathbed, the thing that I'm going to remember is how I helped other people, because I now had this experience, and it changed who I was forever. It inspired me to pursue a path where my passion, my purpose in my life was going to be bigger than me. My purpose wasn't going to be a title. It was going to be to inspire people to become the best version of themselves. Because when they fill their cup and they learn about who they are, what they want, what their values are, what their belief systems are, what their principles are, and they get all that in alignment, and they fill their own cup up so full, that cup starts overflowing. And then the only thing that naturally comes through is this desire to serve, this desire to help. And that's what creates the most powerful, sustainable form of peak experience every day, where you can wake up feeling alive, knowing that you're waking up today doing something in alignment with who you are. Everybody's calling is different. Everybody's version of service is different. For some, it's going to be a mother. For some, it's going to be a real estate agent. For some, it's going to be a speaker, an author, an artist, whatever that is. It's about taking your gifts, what you're passionate about, what you love, what you hate, and what you want to see change in the world, and getting all of that congruent with one another. And when you show up from that place, that's what I found. That's the ultimate peak experience to me. And then maybe in between those things, we can go off and travel and go ride our waves and climb our mountains and do the things that we love too.
So the answer to deep and lasting fulfillment is figure out what your shovel is, pick it up, and go and help your neighbor.
I love that. I love that. One thing I learned from Tony is that pleasure's in the body. It's physical. And when I go ride a wave, I get a physiological response. Endorphins are running through my body. I'm in an adrenaline. And so I experience a peak experience. But pleasure's in the body. It comes and goes. It's, not too long after that wave is over, assuming it's just a normal wave, next 5-10 minutes, I'm back to normal. It comes and goes. Sex, it's pleasure. Boom, we come, it's over, done. Pleasure's in the body. Happiness is in the mind, which means it's a choice. Marcus Aurelius said that a man can make a hell out of heaven and a heaven out of hell. My father would just say, life is all about perspective. Attitude is everything. So pick a good one. It's a mindset. It's not about what happens to you. It's the meaning that you associate to what happens to you. That's happiness. That's up here. Joy and fulfillment. Joy and fulfillment is in the soul. And the way to experience fulfillment is through service, is through contribution. Guru Gauranga says that when something is living in its nature, it experiences peace. Water in its nature is peaceful. When you look at an ocean bright early in the morning before any wind comes up, it is flat, it is calm, it is peaceful. You experience peace just by looking at it. That's why people love the beach. And yeah, there's going to be some stormy waves that come through, such as life. We've got our hard days, but eventually the wind calms and settles and it experiences peace. The soul's nature is service. So when we serve, we experience peace.
George, thank you. That was really beautiful to listen to. So rich with just humanity. And I would love it, and I'm sure Tom would too, if you would take some time to share with us how you bring this peace and service, this connection to something greater, into the lives of your clients.
It's an adventure. It's an adventure because we think we know the destination. We think we have things figured out. And sometimes life knocks us on our ass. And sometimes it knocks us on our ass and again. And when we make the same mistakes over and over and over again, we're left to question, okay, what am I doing wrong? I got the formula down wrong. That was my thing. You know, I followed the white picket fence model. Go to school, get good grades, get the job, make the 6 figures, climb the ladder, do the things, get the, you know, I did all that and it didn't work. It did help me get to a certain place in life, and I'm very grateful for that. But fulfillment, meaning, purpose wasn't it. It was all about asking powerful questions. Yes, is there energy that we have to clear out? Yeah, we got to clear out the old limiting beliefs. We have to clear out the old conditioning. And for some, and I'm saying this very intentionally and maybe controversially, who have been blessed with a little bit of trauma, when we work through that deep healing work to clear out the baggage, unpack the baggage, clear it out. So when we repack it with who we want, it's a little bit lighter to carry us forward. That's what going on a journey with me is like. And I use that identity totem pole. I help people figure out where their values are. And by the way, some of these values, they come from our most painful and pleasurable experiences in our life. So that's the direct question right there, because the values to me, I call it the totem pole because what's the foundation? The foundation is your values. And our values are, as Brene Brown says, our way of being in the world. So where do our values come from? Do we pick these values? Do we read about them and say, oh, that sounds cool, I want to do that? Well, as it turns out, our values come from our experiences. And what I found is I've done the deep work to go backwards and relive some of the most painful experiences of my life. I found certain values. Mine are intuition, courage, faith, fun, and gratitude. And all of those values, they weren't like hand selected by me. They were found in my past. They were found in the things that I'd experienced. But what I do is, as a coach, is we have a lens of the way that we view the world. And when we go back and retrace back to some of these old stories, I help my clients look at what they experienced through a different lens. For example, my mom raised me Catholic. Went to church every Sunday, went to religious school for the first 7.5 years of my life. And man, did she jam it down my throat. And me being the rebel that I am, I wanted to ask a lot of why questions, and I didn't get a lot of answers that gave me the certainty about spirituality or religion at the time. But when I was 16 years old, I made a decision. I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was at a party with a friend, and I decided to get into a car with a drunk driver. We heard that there was another party that was happening not too far away from us, and I made a choice. And turns out this guy was a professional race car driver at a very young age, juvenile Formula One racer. And so he's speeding, going 80 miles an hour up these switchback, these windy roads. And I live on this big hill called Palos Verdes in Los Angeles. And I just immediately, I'm in like fight or flight mode because I'm literally feeling fear. And I said, okay, I got to roll this window down. I got to throw this beer I'm drinking out the window. I got to put my safety belt on, and I'm going to grab and hold on tight. And as soon as I grabbed on, within 10 seconds, the car is spinning around this turn and it hits a puddle. It fishtails, the tail slides out, hits a curb, rolls over, and then falls off of a 100-foot cliff. I get knocked unconscious. Car's face down in the ditch. And I remember starting to come to, and it's like the movies where you're kind of stunned and hazed and you can't really see things. Things are hazy, and I see this really bright light. And as I fully regain consciousness, I realize that the car we're in is completely engorged in flames. And fight or flight kicks in again. I start panicking. I start trying to open the door, but the door is jammed shut because we're in this crevice. We're stuck, can't get out. And I remember just sitting back in my chair, looking out into this fire and just thinking, this is it. It's over. And as soon as I said that, my friend starts shaking me. He starts shaking my shoulders. He says, George, your window is down. And because I rolled that window down moments before the car spun out of control, we climbed through that window, managed to escape unscathed, somehow unharmed, with just minor cuts and bruises. And I remember climbing that cliff up all the way to the top. And this is where my first climbing experience was, Tom. And I'm climbing up to the top. And I remember getting back up. The ambulance, the fire trucks, the cops were there. And then the fire was eye level. And I remember just staring out into this fire. And I remember staring up into the stars that night and just feeling this profound sense that there was something up there protecting me, looking after me. Someone, something, some force. I don't know what it is. Mom would call it God. I don't know what it is, but it is fucking there. And I just heard this voice just say, not yet. And I felt in that moment that for whatever reason, I was given a second chance. That I was given a second chance to do something important in this life. And it was beyond what I had been seeing and been used to, you know, my friends driving BMWs and raising really wealthy and raised in wealth and affluence. And I'm going to use the word selfishness. And I just said my life was spared for something more. Now, I'm 16 years old. I got no idea what this means. But when I looked back at this story from this lens, what I realized is that this was my first experience of true faith. And by the way, this was a peak experience because when I looked up in the stars, I felt like this connection. When you feel like there's something beyond you that's guiding you with this sense of grace. I mean, this fucking thing flew off a cliff and I don't have any broken arms, no broken bodies. I was in a car on fire, for God's sake. Like this, I looked at my friend Connor, I was like, this should not have happened. We should not be here. Why? And at the time, looking back, the only answer was faith. It's faith that there is something out there and faith that my life was meant for something important, bigger than me. And it took a long journey for me to figure out what that was. But it was anytime I'm feeling like a sense of doubt, a sense of will I make it? Will it work out? I come back to that moment where I did not survive that, to not make it here, for it to go wrong here, for me to falter and cave here. And we all have these experiences in our life. You don't have to have flown off of a cliff. Your experience of life is relative to your experience. But when we look at it and can say, what was not the silver lining there, but what was the gold lining there? And I say that gold lining because it's shaped to who you are. And in life, you can only be who you are. And you are a sum of all the experiences that you've had in your life. Some of them bigger, and some of them smaller. But the values are going to come from the significant ones. And when we can just take a little 2 millimeter shift in the way that we relive that story, and it can be just one question that creates that insight. This is, wow, that was a moment of faith. Or wow, that was a moment of courage. Or wow, my intuition, my body was telling me something, and for whatever reason, I chose to act on it, and something great happened. Something pleasurable happened. That's the start of the process of how we figure out who we are. And if that resonates with you, your chances are you're feeling something right now in your body. Because when the body is connected and the mind is connected with who you are, we feel an expansion of our soul. This is the soul set work. This is the expansion work. This is how we can live in peak experience every day. And there are tricks that we can do, the breath work, the meditation, priming ourselves in our morning, because where focus goes, energy flows. So when we focus on scarcity, we feel a certain way. When we focus on abundance, we feel a certain way. That's where gratitude came in for me. As I started trusting this process of gratitude and learning about how powerful gratitude can be, it can shape us in every single way possible in who we become and how we live and what energy we put out in the world. And so these are some of the experiences that I've just lived through that I don't tell people, hey, this is my story, should be yours. I ask people, what's your story? What have you experienced? Where have you come from? And I help them look at it from a different angle. And that's a little snippet of how I guide on this adventure that we call life.
Such a powerful story. I'm drawn back to what you said earlier, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And an idea that's very central for us in the work that we do with our clients is that when we face our mortality, as you did very, very starkly in that example that you just shared, but when you're riding a big wave, when you're climbing a big cliff, when you're in a storm, when you're in the middle of nowhere in the ocean, you are faced front and center with your mortality. And what shows up in that moment is indicative of how you do everything in your life. And all the same excuses and fears and everything comes up, but also all of your strengths and your gifts. And, it's a space for intuition to be present. It's a space for grace to be present. And that connection, like you said, with something bigger, whatever that is, whether it's God or the universe or higher self or whatever you want to call it, it's in these moments, these peak experiences, is when we feel that connection.
Absolutely. In my experience, it's so much of what holds us back in our life is fear. And for all those that are listening, if you are in a certain place and you aren't where you want to be open to the possibility of where fear is showing up in your life. And I share that because these experiences that we all relate to, that Curtis and Tom and I relate to, these adventures where there is a physical sense of fear, there's literally a fear of death that can oftentimes come up for a lot of people when they think about things that we do. What helps us move through that fear? It's courage. And I'm so glad that you brought this up, Tom, because what I've found in our life is that where we can put ourselves and induce ourselves into our peak experience at work, in our relationship, is where is the fear showing up? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid to have that really hard to have conversation? Are you really afraid to ask for that promotion? Are you really afraid to quit the job and do the thing that you know you love doing, but you're afraid that you won't be successful, you won't make money, you won't be able to raise a family, where is the fear showing up for you? Peel the layers back. And all of our mentors, Rich Liffen says this, and I love it so much, is that we think that we need confidence to move through fear, and we don't. Confidence is not a prerequisite, it's a result. What we need is courage. Courage is when fear and taking action come together. And that intention of courage, which is one of my values, is what guides me to how can I show up from a place of courage today? Meaning, where's the fear in my life? And what's the decision that I want to make through that fear? Because everything that you want in life is on the other side of that fear. And when we're ever trying to get unstuck, push to the next level, it's where's the fear? Where's the fear? Where's my edge, as we say in our yoga practice? And being the guy that I am, I love pushing the limits. One of my favorite quotes from that movie with Christian Bale and Matt Damon, the car racing movie, I'm drawing a blank. What's it called? With the Shelby GT, they're racing around. They're trying to win the race in Italy. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of the movie right now.
Is it Ford versus Ferrari?
Yes, Ford versus Ferrari. And I love it when Shelby is talking to Christian Bale's character, and Christian is pushing this engine to the point where it's going to explode, right? And he looks at Shelby and he says, Shelby, listen, if you're going to push something to its limits, you have to have an idea of where that limit is. Meaning you got to push yourself over the edge sometimes. Eventually, you have to just have the courage to say, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And when you finally develop the courage to do that thing, to go the distance, to make the decision, it expands. You get really focused, you get really present because you think you're in fight or flight mode. And it's a mindset work of conditioning yourself to feel the fear and do the action anyways. And so that's where the courage for me comes in. It gets practiced in surfing. It gets practiced in coaching. It gets practiced definitely in relationships. And when we start practicing it little by little by little, it's just like going to the gym, rep by rep. We start building more and more muscle, more and more muscle. And chances are, if you're the type of person listening to this podcast, you've had some experiences where you've had to tap into a tremendous amount of courage. I'm curious where that was. Where can you find where you act courageously? And where can you give that sense of self-gratitude, of pride and proudness that, you know what? I fucking went through that. I did that. Why wouldn't I not be able to do that again? What part of me was I able to access then that I can bring into this moment now, where I know that I want to make the next decision here? Courage. And you said intuition. You know, our intuition is in our body, and our body doesn't lie to us. Our body's programmed to protect us. Our body knows what we want and what we don't want. Our mind is the part that says, I need, I should. So when you're feeling that body hit, and by the way, that's why yoga and meditation come up so often, is because it teaches us how to become more aware of the physical responses that we have in our body. Where's the tension that we hold? Is it in our shoulders? Is it in our back? Is it in our hips? Psychosomatically, we hold so much energetic stress inside of our body. So when we can start reading our body, we can start tapping into our intuition. And I've taken these values and I've come up with this mantra, and it says, may you be guided by your intuition, have the wisdom and the courage to follow it, and the faith, knowing that everything will be well. And it's just my North Star. It's my guiding force. Whenever I get up here, what's my intuition telling me? Whenever I'm afraid, what's the place of courage I need to come from? And the thing that really pulls me over the edge through the limit through the uncertainty is the faith, is my story of faith, is that I didn't make it to give up. I didn't make it this far to quit here. And I know that's got to be about something bigger than me, because by the way, when you're willing to, you're 10 times likely to do more for other people than you are yourself. You know, if I said, hey, go move in front of a moving bus and I'll give you $1 million, you probably wouldn't do it because you'd get smacked and you get killed. Yet if I said your son or daughter was in the way of that bus and that bus is coming in at 60 miles an hour, you're going to act with lightning speed. That's just the way we're programmed. We're programmed to help each other. And so it's understand, for me, it's just like, as I've lived my life and I've understood where these things have showed up, I piece them all together with the conscious awareness of this is who I am. I am intuition. I am courage. I am faith. And that's my anchor. That's what keeps me center. That's what keeps me focused. That's what keeps me driving forward. And once you taste these peak experiences, friends, you're going to want more. Let me tell you that right now. You are going to want more, because they are what makes us come alive. And isn't that what we're here for?
Can you just repeat that mantra again?
Say again?
Just repeat that mantra for everyone listening again. It was beautiful.
May you be guided by your intuition and have the wisdom and courage to follow it, and the faith knowing that all will be well, and have fun along the way, because isn't that what we're here for? Our adventure guys, right? Doesn't have to be so serious all the time.
Crucial addition at the end.
Yep.
Yeah. George, in a roundabout way, in a very long conversation, you have brought it back to the answer of the question that I asked you at the beginning of how I'm not feeling that focus right now. And I'm sure there's many other people who, like me, have tapped into that and are looking for their way back to that focus, that pure focus in their daily life. And it's really about one simple word. It's courage. It sums it all up. And everything that you said around that portion of the conversation, courage, the ability to step in, and you really brought it back to unpacking and repacking our identity, in finding the lessons and the values that come out of our traumatic experiences. And everyone has traumatic experiences. And again, it's so important not just to go into our traumatic experiences to re-traumatize ourselves, but to unpack them, release them, and evolve those experiences and our understanding so that we see the values that they gave us, the gifts that they gave us, what we created because of those experiences. And that really takes courage. And my adventures in the outdoors and my peak experiences in the spiritual world have prepared me, and in every way been a tool that I have used to guide me through that process of elevating my past and creating a new future.
Well, that's beautiful, Curtis. I mean, what I hear from that is you've used adventure to have a transcendental experience, to lift your level of self-awareness beyond the old story. That's what shadow work is. And to me, adventure and nature have played a big role in shadow work. And shadow work, I have this great definition of it. And it's shadow work is when we go in to the repressed memories, the repressed trauma, the repressed belief systems that are anchored inside of our body somewhere, that have to be released in order for us to become who we want to become, in order to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And that baggage, that old energy, is subconsciously playing out in the form of our favorite word in the coaching world, patterns, habits and patterns of behavior, habits and patterns of the way we think, habits and patterns of the way that where we focus on. Do we focus on what's missing in life? Or do we tend to focus on what we have? Most people, we accidentally focus on what's missing. Are we focusing on the past and constantly reliving that past over and over and over again with the same story, the same victimized story? Or are we focused so much so on the future that we're anxious, antsy, and we're not focused on the present moment, here, now, today, in this moment? What are the habits and patterns of the way that we make decisions? Do we tend to make decisions from a place of fear? I'm afraid this will happen, so and we're just programmed, because again, how we do anything is how we do everything. So, or do we tend to start, and so when we start to catch our awareness of these patterns, the patterns are the surface level, then we can start tracing back and figuring out, where do these patterns come from? Where does this belief system come from? Where does the way I set goals come from? And that's where the power of shadow work, healing, spiritual work, soul set work, heart set work come into play there. And that's part of the journey. That is definitely part of the journey, because when you can look at your past with grace, you transcend your trauma. Your trauma becomes your treasure, and tied into your sense of purpose, connected to your fulfillment, it means that you're going to somehow find a way to use that trauma to help other people. And that's what makes it a treasure. Because now in this day and age, we crave authenticity. We crave vulnerability. We want to show our humanness. Just having the courage to express the way that we actually feel is so challenging for most people. Why? Because we're taught that we're going to be judged. And when we're taught that we're going to be judged, we put out an image of who we think we need to be, who we think we should be, to be loved, to be liked, to be hired, to get the client, to win the business, to make the money, to find the relationship. You look at media, so the social media for the last 20 years, it's just been filled with this mask. And we're now stepping out in a major way of how we show up in the world. And to be able to show up with that authenticity comes from being able to do that deep inner work first on yourself. And that's how you can look back at these experiences that we've had and say, wow, thank you. Thank you for showing me how not to be. Thank you for helping me find the light within me. Even though we can be so beaten, so bruised, so damaged, if you're here listening to this and that's been you, you've gotten through it. You've had the courage just to keep going on. That deserves a level of gratitude in of itself. That deserves you looking in the mirror and just saying thank you. And just being able to look at that. And that's another, to answer a question you mentioned earlier, Curtis, is we look back, we do that deep work. And then once we're able to get through that work and shed and feel more in touch with our authentic self, see more clearly, think more clearly, feel more deeply, and live more in alignment, naturally, just like all three of us, we ask, like, gosh, how can I help other people experience this? Gosh, there are so many people that haven't been able to cultivate this yet. And that's what drives me. That's what makes me come alive. That's what gets me so passionate. It's because I know it's possible. And I know what it feels like to think that it's not possible. I know what it feels like to be in the hole, to be depressed, to not think you're going to make it through. And there's just a couple of things to change the lens and the way we look at things. A couple shifts that need to be made. When we're on our yoga mat and our yoga practice, sometimes it's the slightest adjustment of moving from internal rotation to external rotation on our shoulders. And it makes all the difference between injury in a push-up and doing it with perfect alignment. It's just a 2 millimeter shift. How we do anything is how we do everything. Sometimes it's just a 2 millimeter shift of the way that we look at our life, the way we look at the past, the way we look at ourselves, and the way that we envision the future. Sometimes it's just a 2 millimeter shift to make all the difference when you hit a golf ball or with a golf club, whether that ball goes 300 yards straight or 10 yards far over to the right. It's just a 2 millimeter shift. And so it's all about how we make these 2 millimeter shifts, how we live through our experience, how we seek out those experiences, and we tune in and we stop and we pause. And that's what we're here doing today. We're reflecting. How did we do this? How did we get here? So when you have those peak experiences and when you act from that courage, stop for a moment. Just give yourself a, what just happened here? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I experiencing? What does it mean? What am I learning? What was around me when that happened? And all of a sudden, bit by bit, and I'll be honest, my personal development, I've been doing yoga meditation for 15 years. My personal development journey, my real spiritual journey started 4 years ago. I barely know anything. I've got such a long way to go. But I can honestly say that I can wake up in the morning and sit down and in my meditation, look out at a backyard. By the way, I live with my parents right now. And it's been so interesting coming back home to the place where I was raised and taking it all for granted when I was a kid. And now looking at what's right in front of me and seeing it with awe and wonder. This morning, I saw a coyote come just walking along the hillside. Never seen that before in my entire life in my parents' backyard. A red-bellied hawk was sitting on a wire line this morning. all these beautiful things are happening all around us all the time. Sometimes we just have to sit back and pause, slow down to speed up, as our mentor says, right? Enjoy, savor. Yeah.
No, and I'm sure everybody listening could sit and listen to you all day long. But it's hard to believe, but the hour is up. So if people want that 2mm shift, how do they get in touch with you?
My Instagram is a great place to find me, at shapeshift_coach. You could also just type in my name, George Yueh, Yueh. It's a rarely used name on social media. I'm usually the only one that pops up, whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So feel free to connect me there. I don't really use LinkedIn that much. I'm told I should start, but I want to use my Instagram right now. So I'm going to keep using my Instagram. But that would be a great way to connect if anybody wants to say hello, chat. It'd be a privilege and honor to connect with anyone who really felt like they resonate with this message. So thank you guys for having me.
It's been a privilege and an honor to have you on.
It truly has. This has been a truly memorable hour. So at shapeshift_coach, if you want to get in touch with George, hope that you've got as much out of this last hour as we have, and we'll see you next time for the Adventure Effect Live.